Right, so if you found your way here at a reasonable hour, lovely, welcome. And if you found your way here at 1:30 in the morning with your phone propped against a pillow, and the brightness turned down to almost nothing because you've learned the hard way what happens when you fall asleep with a screen at full blast against your face, well, you're exactly who I made this for. That's the intended audience, if I'm honest. The slightly too tired to keep scrolling crowd. Come in, find a comfortable position. We're going to be here a while. Here's the thing I want to talk about tonight, and it's a thought that took me an embarrassingly long time to actually have, considering how much of this stuff I've watched. Most people, when they think about Marvel, they picture one world, one place where all the heroes live and bump into each other and occasionally save a city. And that's a perfectly reasonable way to think about it. But it's not quite right, because the more time you spend with all of this, the more you start to notice that Marvel isn't one world at all. It's a whole stack of them. Worlds sitting inside other worlds. Worlds pressed up against each other with only a thin wall between them. Worlds underneath the floor of the world you thought was the only one. Worlds that exist outside of time entirely, which is a sentence that sounds absurd written down and somehow makes complete sense once you've seen it. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're going to wander through all of them. Every distinct realm, every dimension, every pocket of reality, every separate universe that this enormous sprawling story has shown us. Slowly, one at a time, like walking through a very large old house and opening every door just to see what's behind it, and finding that some doors open onto golden cities, and some open onto the space beneath an atom, and some open onto a fluorescent lit office where time itself gets filed away in triplicate. There's no quiz at the end. There's no test. I'm not going to build to some big dramatic reveal, because that's not what this is for. If you fall asleep somewhere around the third or fourth room, that's not a failure, that's the entire point. Each place we visit stands on its own. You won't miss some crucial payoff by drifting off. You'll just wake up in a different part of the house, or more likely, you'll wake up tomorrow with your phone dead and a vague memory of someone talking quietly about a planet that was secretly a person. We'll get to that one. It's a good one. If this is the sort of thing you like, the slow, unhurried sort of video you put on when the room feels a bit too quiet and you want a familiar voice filling the corners of it, there's a subscribe button somewhere on this screen. No pressure at all, it'll keep. I'd rather you relax than do anything about it right now. So let's start. Not at the beginning of the story, because honestly, the story doesn't really have a beginning so much as it has a sort of foundation that everything else got built on top of. Let's start at the bottom of the stack, the ground floor, the part of reality that everything else, every realm and dimension and alternate Earth we're going to visit tonight, is quietly resting on without ever really knowing it's there. So here's where I want to start, and it's a strange place to start, because it's less of a place and more of a sort of underlying physics that holds everything else up. If the whole of Marvel is a building, this is the concrete it's poured on. And the concrete, it turns out, is 6 rocks. I know how that sounds. 6 rocks. But stay with me, because once you understand what these things actually are, an enormous amount of the rest of it clicks into place in a way that's quite satisfying. The 6 rocks are the Infinity Stones, and the thing to understand about them is that they're not really weapons, even though they get used as weapons constantly, by basically everyone, throughout the entire story. They're more like the fundamental settings of the universe made solid. Each one is a concentration of one of the basic forces that the cosmos runs on. There's space, there's time, there's reality, there's power, there's mind, and there's soul. 6 forces, 6 stones. And each one on its own is enough to reshape an entire civilization if you know what you're doing with it, and you can survive holding it, which most people can't. I find that genuinely unsettling if I sit with it too long, which is maybe not the most relaxing thing to admit at the start of a sleep video, but here we are. The idea that reality runs on 6 objects, that you could, in principle, gather up the source code of existence and hold it in one hand. It's the kind of thing that's so big it sort of slides off your brain rather than sticking, which is probably for the best. At the start of all this, the stones are scattered, flung out across the universe, hidden in different places, locked away in vaults, or sitting in plain sight being held by people who have absolutely no idea what they've actually got. And here's a fun detail about them, the kind of thing that rewards paying attention across the whole long story. Each stone tends to show up in a particular colour, and once you know them, you start spotting them everywhere, often years before anyone in the story names them. The space stone is blue, and for a long time, it hides inside a glowing cube, sitting quietly in a church, then in a vault, getting studied and poked at by people who think it's just a remarkable energy source. The Mind Stone is yellow, and it spends ages set into a scepter, subtly nudging the thoughts of everyone who spends time near it, before it ends up in a rather more surprising home. The Reality Stone is red, the strange liquid ether we just spent time with. The Power Stone is purple, so dangerous that the first person to touch it barehanded in centuries is simply vaporized on the spot. The Time Stone is green, worn as an amulet by a certain arrogant sorcerer, and the Soul Stone, the orange one, is hidden at the far edge of space behind a price so cruel it gets a quiet room of its own later tonight. What I find lovely about this is that the story plants them in plain sight, scene after scene, film after film, glowing away in the background of stories that seem to be about something else entirely, and only slowly lets you understand that you've been watching the 6 most powerful objects in existence drift toward each other the whole time. It's a very patient piece of storytelling, and it rewards the kind of person who notices a blue glow and files it away. Anyway, 6 stones, scattered, waiting. And that's important, because the whole long arc of the early story, the thing every other thread eventually gets woven around, is the slow question of where these 6 things are and who's trying to collect them. Everything else, all the heroes and the realms and the wars we're going to talk about, all of it is in some sense happening on top of this slow gravitational pull of 6 objects wanting to be brought together. But now, since we're down here at the foundation level, let's talk about the gardeners, because the stones aren't the only ancient thing holding the universe up. There are also the Celestials. The Celestials are enormous, and I mean that in a way that the word enormous doesn't really cover. We're talking about beings roughly the size of a small moon, ancient almost beyond comprehension, older than most of the planets you could point a telescope at, and they've been doing the same patient thing for billions of years. They seed planets with life. And here's the part that I think is one of the genuinely great quiet horrors buried in all of this. The part that's hidden in plain sight, rather than locked in some vault. The way it works is that a celestial plants a seed deep inside a planet. The planet, over millions of years, develops life. That life grows and spreads and generates energy. And eventually, all that accumulated energy feeds the seed until the seed is ready. And a new celestial emerges from the planet, fully grown, which destroys the planet in the process. So the life that grew there, all of it, every civilization that ever rose and fell on that world, was essentially fuel, fertilizer for a cosmic being to be born. That's the secret underneath the floor of the whole Marvel universe. Not whispered in some after-credits scene. It's just the basic reality of how this cosmos works. Planets exist to be used. Life arises to power something larger, and then it ends. It's a bleak little fact, and I almost feel bad introducing it this early, but I promise it gets warmer from here. And besides, there's something oddly soothing about cosmic indifference at 1 in the morning. The universe is vast and it's running an enormous patient process that has nothing to do with you, and somehow that takes a bit of the weight off. Or maybe that's just me. To manage all this seeding and growing, the Celestials made helpers. But the helpers and the world they were sent to look after, those deserve a room of their own. So let's gently move up 1 floor and talk about them. Picture this. For the last 7,000 years, there have been 10 people walking around among us who are not, in any normal sense, people at all. They've been in the crowd at the founding of cities. They've stood at the edges of empires. They watched things happen that we now only have a few crumbling tablets and some guesswork to remember. And they remember all of it perfectly, because they were there, and they don't age, and they don't really die. That's the Eternals. And I think the reason their corner of all this stays with me is less about what they do and more about the sheer, quiet strangeness of it. The idea of immortals embedded in human history, present for everything, allowed to interfere in almost nothing. They were made by the Celestials, the enormous gardeners we just talked about, and sent down to Earth roughly 7,000 years ago. 10 of them, each one built with a specific set of abilities. There's Circe, who can transmute matter, turn one thing into another with a touch. There's Icarus, who can fly and fire beams of cosmic energy from his eyes, which, yes, is extremely Superman. And the story knows it's extremely Superman, and is better for just letting that sit there, rather than pretending otherwise. There's Thena, a warrior, Gilgamesh, the strongest of them, Sprite, who can spin perfect illusions out of nothing, Druig, who can reach into a mind and steer it, Makari, who moves faster than thought, Phastos, an inventor of staggering ability, the one who quietly nudged human technology along across the centuries, Kingo, a performer and energy thrower, and Ajak, their leader, the only one who actually got to speak with the Celestial who sent them. Their job was narrow and strange. They were told to protect humanity, but only from one specific threat, a predator species called the Deviants. They were not, under any circumstances, to interfere in human conflicts. No stepping into wars, no stopping atrocities. They had to stand and watch humanity do terrible things to itself for thousands of years and keep their hands at their sides, because those weren't the rules. And you can imagine, or maybe you can't, what that does to a group of people over that span of time. Here's the detail I love, the one that gives this whole section its flavour. They were everywhere. They were in ancient Babylon, helping early cities find their footing. They lived as gods in the Gupta Empire in India. They were revered in Tenochtitlan among the Aztecs. And in one of the quietly devastating touches, they were in Hiroshima in 1945, watching. Phastos in particular, who of all of them grew the most attached to humanity. The one who loved us in a way the others found a bit baffling. Just imagine carrying that. Imagine being there for the best and the worst of an entire species across 7 millennia, and being told the whole time that your role was to protect, but only from the monsters, never from ourselves. In the present day, they're scattered, living small lives. Circe's in London working in a museum, which is a lovely touch when you think about it. An immortal who has personally witnessed history, now gently curating it behind glass. Kingo became a Bollywood star because if you're going to be beautiful and charismatic and unchanging for centuries, you may as well lean into it. Druig holed up in a forest in the Peruvian Amazon, running a little community with his mind. They drifted apart, the way any group does once the thing that bound them together stops feeling urgent. A couple of them carry the weight of all those centuries in particular ways that I find quietly affecting. There's one, a warrior called Thena, who suffers from a condition the Eternals call the Maht Wairi, which is essentially what happens when a mind that doesn't age has to hold thousands of years of memory. It overflows. The memories blur together. The past bleeds into the present. And she has episodes where she can't tell which century she's in or who's standing in front of her. It's a remarkably humane bit of world building when you think about it. We tend to treat immortality as an unalloyed gift in stories, the thing everyone secretly wants. And here's the story quietly pointing out that a human mind probably isn't built to carry that many centuries of everything, and that living forever might mean slowly drowning in your own remembering. And then there's Phastos, the inventor, the one most attached to humanity, who eventually builds a quiet, ordinary life with a husband and a son, and loves them with the particular tenderness of someone who knows exactly how brief their lives will be next to his. The Eternals are at their best when they're sitting with that. The strange grief of outlasting everyone, over and over, forever. But now, here's the part that ties this room to the foundation we were just standing on. The reason they were really sent. The Eternals were told they were here to protect humanity from the deviants, and they believed it for thousands of years. The truth, which only comes out much later, is that they were never the guardians they thought they were. They were the gardener's staff. There's a celestial called Tiamut growing inside the earth. Has been the whole time, slowly, the way these things grow. And all those thousands of years of human civilization that the Eternals were nurturing and protecting, all of it was energy being gathered to feed Tiamut until it was ready to emerge. Which, as we established downstairs, destroys the planet it grows in. So the Earth, this whole world, was an egg, and the people on it were the warmth keeping the egg viable. The Eternals weren't shepherds. They were incubator technicians who'd been kept in the dark about what the incubator was for. When they finally learn this, they fracture, which is exactly what you'd want them to do, honestly. Icarus has known the truth for a long time and believes the mission is sacred, that the birth of a celestial is worth more than one planet's worth of life. And the maths actually supports him if you're cold enough about it. Billions of new lives across the cosmos against the billions on one world. He's not wrong about the numbers, he's wrong about the conclusion, which is a distinction the story is smart enough to draw. The rest of them decide a planet full of people they've come to love is not an acceptable price, and they stop the emergence. Cersei turns the half-born celestial to stone at the moment it tries to rise. And the wonderful thing, the thing that makes this such a strange quiet room in the house, is that almost nobody on Earth ever finds out any of it happened. We nearly ended. A god the size of a continent nearly tore its way out of the planet, and the news cycle didn't so much as twitch. 10 immortals settled an argument about whether we deserve to exist, and we just went on having Tuesdays. There's something I find genuinely calming about that. Most of the most important things that ever nearly happened entirely without us noticing. Let's carry that thought up the stairs to the next floor. There's a golden city built on a secret, and the secret is older and darker than almost anyone living in the city knows. That's the image I always come back to with Asgard. A beautiful place, gleaming, full of warriors and feasts and noble traditions, and underneath all of it, a foundation of things that were quietly buried so the gold would shine a bit brighter. Let's get the geography sorted first, because it's lovely and a bit confusing. Asgard isn't in space exactly. You couldn't find it by pointing a telescope at the right patch of sky. It's one of the 9 realms, 9 separate worlds connected by an ancient cosmic structure called Yggdrasil, the World Tree. Now, World Tree makes it sound like there's a literal enormous tree holding 9 planets in its branches, and the imagery the story uses does lean into that, but it's really more of a metaphysical framework. A way of describing how 9 distinct worlds are linked together. Some of those realms are populated, some are barren, some are downright hostile, and the Asgardians travel between them on the Bifrost, which is a bridge of rainbow light that works as a sort of a teleportation system across the realms. I'll be honest, written out plainly like that, it sounds completely ridiculous. A rainbow bridge that fires you across the universe, but it looks magnificent on screen, all shimmering colour and rushing light, and I've made my peace with the fact that the silliest sounding things in this story are often the ones that land hardest visually. That's sort of the whole deal with this universe, really. Asgard is ruled by Odin, and here's where the buried secret starts, because the Asgard we meet, the one with all the noble traditions, remembers itself as a realm of honourable warriors. But at the height of his power, Odin wasn't a gentle shepherd of the cosmos. He was a conqueror. He led the Asgardian armies across the 9 realms, taking territory, expanding an empire, crushing anyone who stood against him. The Asgardians we get to know are the descendants of that age raised on stories of honour, mostly unaware of how much blood the foundations were laid in. One of the defining wars of that era was against the frost giants of Jotunheim, an enormous, cold, powerful people led by their king Laufey. They tried to invade Earth, of all places, centuries before our story starts, and Odin drove them back and took the source of their power, an artifact called the Casket of Ancient Winters, as a trophy. After that, an uneasy, resentful peace held for a very long time. But here's what Odin didn't tell anyone, and didn't tell anyone for an extremely long time. After that battle, on the frozen Jotunheim battlefield, he found a baby, small blue, abandoned, left to die, Laufey's own son. And Odin took the child, changed his appearance so he looked Asgardian rather than blue-skinned, and raised him as his own, beside his biological son Thor. He named the child Loki. The official version, I suspect, was that Odin meant it as a gesture of peace. A frost giant raised Asgardian, who might one day be a bridge between two enemy peoples. What actually grew out of it was something far messier. Loki spent his whole childhood in Thor's shadow, always the clever one rather than the strong one, always sensing that something about his place in the family didn't quite fit, and never knowing why. For years and years. That kind of low background hum of not belonging, with no explanation attached to it, it curdles a person. And that's not even the deepest secret. There's also Hela, Odin's firstborn, the goddess of death, his executioner, the one who stood at his side and wielded his power during all that conquering. She and Odin built the empire together, and then Odin decided he'd conquered enough, that peace was better than endless war, that they should rule what they had rather than keep taking more. And Hela disagreed, profoundly, violently. Her power was enormous and still growing, and eventually Odin couldn't control her anymore. So he imprisoned her in another dimension, sealed away by a spell tied to his own life, and then carefully, deliberately, he erased her. The statues, the tapestries, the official histories, all rewritten so that she simply ceased to have existed, and Asgard got to remember its golden age as a tale of noble warriors instead of brutal conquest, because the person who'd have reminded them otherwise had been edited out. Thor grows up believing the clean version, so does Loki. They both swallowed the polished story whole, because why wouldn't they? And here's a fun detail to set down gently, because it matters more than you'd think later on. Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, was forged in the heart of a dying star by dwarves, and Odin laid an enchantment on it. Whosoever holds this hammer, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. That word, worthy, is doing an enormous amount of quiet work. It's not about strength. It's not about who you're related to. It's a kind of moral fingerprint check baked into a weapon, and it sits there for ages before it really pays off in a way that, when it does, tends to make a room full of people lose their minds a little. I won't walk through all of Thor's story here, because his is a tale that happens across realms rather than in one, and we're touring places tonight, not chasing one man around. But the short version of how Asgard's story bends is this. Thor starts out arrogant, gets humbled, learns what worthiness actually means. Loki's resentment and his discovery of his true parentage send him spiraling through betrayal after betrayal, though there's real grief under all of it, and the story never lets you forget that he's a person who was lied to about who he was from the moment he was found. And Hela, the buried secret, eventually claws her way back out, because secrets that big never stay buried, and her return more or less ends the old Asgard entirely, which brings us gently to the strangest chapter in the realm's whole history. Asgard, the golden, eternal city, gets destroyed. And here's the lovely, almost philosophical turn the story takes when it happens, because it would be easy to treat the destruction of a beautiful ancient city as pure tragedy, and instead it lands somewhere more thoughtful. When Hela does return, freed at last from her long imprisonment, she's nearly unstoppable, drawing power directly from Asgard itself, from its soil, from the realm that made her. As long as Asgard exists, she only grows stronger there, and there's no beating her on her own ground. So the solution Thor eventually arrives at is genuinely radical. To stop her, he has to let Asgard be destroyed. He has to release an ancient, fiery force of prophesied destruction and let it consume the whole Golden Realm, because Hela's power is rooted in the place, and if the place is gone, so is her advantage. And there's a line in there from Odin that reframes the entire 1,000-year history of the realm in a single breath. Asgard, he says, was never a place. It was a people. The city, the palace, the Rainbow Bridge, all of it, just buildings. The thing that actually mattered, the thing worth saving, was the people standing in it. So they saved the people and let the place burn. The Asgardians pile onto a great ship and sail away from the fire, watching their ancient home come apart behind them. And the realm of the Nine becomes a realm of refugees on a single vessel, looking for somewhere new. I find that genuinely moving. The idea that a home isn't the walls, it's who's inside them. It's the sort of thing that sounds like a greeting card written down, but the story earns it, because you've spent years with that golden city, and watching it go is a real loss. And the line is the only thing that makes the loss bearable. And the survivors, the Asgardian people, end up as exactly that. Refugees. They settle on Earth, in a small fishing town on the coast of Norway, and they call it New Asgard. And there's something quietly moving about that. A civilization that once spanned 9 realms, that conquered and ruled and built rainbow bridges across the cosmos, downsizing to a seaside village with a fish and chips economy and a few tourists. The gods doing their best to get on with ordinary life. Valkyrie ends up running the place, a warrior queen turned, essentially, small town mayor, sorting out tourism and infrastructure where she once rode into battle. It's humble and a bit sad, and also kind of perfect, an empire learning to be a neighbourhood. The thing Odin said turns out to be literally true. Asgard wasn't the Golden City after all. Asgard is wherever the Asgardians happen to be standing, even if that's a chilly Norwegian harbour with a chip shop and a souvenir stand. But that's enough gold for now. Let's go somewhere much darker and much older, a corner of the stack that was around before the universe even switched the lights on. Here's a quiet, dim little corner of the house, and I rather like it precisely because it's dim. Svartalfheim, the Dark Realm, home of the Dark Elves who are, and I want to stress this, properly ancient. Not Odin ancient, not celestial ancient even. The Dark Elves existed before the current universe did, back when the cosmos was nothing but darkness, before there was light or matter or any of the things we'd recognise as existence. They were already there. Their king is Malekith, and his whole ambition is, in a sense, a kind of homesickness. He wants to put everything back the way it was, back to the darkness. He wants to undo the universe and return it to that original lightless state he remembers, the one his people belong to, and to do it, he needs the ether. The ether is, you've probably guessed, one of the Infinity Stones from the Foundation downstairs. It's the reality stone, but in a strange liquid, dangerous form, rather than a neat little gem. A sort of dark flowing substance that warps reality around it. And Malekith wants to unleash it during a cosmic event called the Convergence, a rare alignment that happens once every 5,000 years, when all 9 realms line up and the barriers between worlds grow thin enough for things to pass between them. He tried this once before, thousands of years ago, and was beaten back. Odin's father drove the Dark Elves to the brink. The ether was hidden away, and Malekith and what remained of his people did something genuinely eerie. They went dormant. They climbed into their ships and slept, for thousands upon thousands of years, waiting for the next convergence to come round again. Just imagine that. A whole species of ancient beings, lying still in the dark in their vessels, patient in a way no living thing should be able to be, while empires rose and fell, and the Eternals walked through Babylon, and Asgard conquered the realms, and they slept through all of it, waiting for the stars to line up one more time. I find that one of the more atmospheric ideas in the whole story, honestly. Not because anything Malekith does is especially interesting. He's not the most memorable villain in this universe, and the story sort of knows it, but the image stays with me. The patience of it. Something older than light, waiting in the cold for a clock that ticks once every 5,000 years. And here's a fun detail about how the realms actually fit together that this whole episode leans on, because it's one of the more elegant bits of the cosmology. The convergence isn't just a poetic alignment, it's a genuine, physical lining up of all 9 realms. And when it happens, the barriers between worlds grow so thin that things start slipping through on their own. Objects fall between realms. People stumble through one world and out into another without meaning to. Gravity goes strange in patches. You can be standing in London and drop something, and it lands in another realm entirely, and reach down into a puddle of one world and pull your hand out in a different one. I love that as an idea. The walls between worlds, which are normally solid enough to need a rainbow bridge to cross, going briefly soft and permeable. Just for a moment, once in an age, it turns the final confrontation into this lovely chaos of portals opening and closing all over the place, with people and rubble tumbling between realms mid-fight. When the convergence does finally come round, it brings Malekith back into the world, and the ether ends up inside a person, which is a whole story of its own that touches Asgard and Earth both. The short of it is that the stone, in its liquid form, goes looking for a host, the way these things sometimes do, and bonds itself to a human, who has to carry that reality-warping power around inside her body, while it slowly makes her ill. It's a horrible thing to have happened to you, being chosen as the vessel for a force older than the universe, and it puts a perfectly ordinary person at the centre of an ancient grudge she had nothing to do with, which is rather the recurring fate of humans in this story, isn't it? Minding your own business one minute, carrying a cosmic artifact the next. It doesn't end well for Malekith. He's beaten again, dragged back to Svartalfheim at the wrong moment, and crushed by his own ship, undone by the very permeability he'd been counting on to win. But what I want you to take from this little dim room isn't the plot, it's the texture, the sense that underneath and behind the bright golden realms and the busy human world, there are ancient sleeping things, older than everything, dreaming of putting the lights back out. They don't win, but they're down there, or they were. And speaking of things that are out there, far beyond Earth, beyond even the 9 realms, let's push the front door open and step out into actual deep space, because there's an enormous amount happening out there that almost nobody back home has any idea about. So we've stepped outside, and the first thing to understand about space in this story is how completely separate it is from Earth's experience of things. While people on Earth were going about their business, getting on with their wars and their elections and their entirely Earth-sized problems, there was a vast inhabited cosmos out there that had been going for a very, very long time. Empires, civilizations, and a war so old that neither side can properly remember how it started anymore. That war is between the Kree and the Skrulls, and it's the kind of thing that I find quietly fascinating because of how it sits underneath all the better-known Earth stuff for years before we get the full picture. Let's start with the Kree. They're a militaristic empire, blue-skinned, technologically way ahead of Earth, and absolutely convinced of their own superiority in the way that only a really established empire can be. Their territory is enormous, and they expanded it the way empires always do, by conquest, and then by telling themselves a very flattering story about why the conquest was necessary and just. The Kree are governed by something called the Supreme Intelligence, an artificial composite being, a sort of accumulated consciousness that runs the empire, and it is particularly, almost suspiciously good at the storytelling part, at making the empire feel righteous to the people inside it. Then there are the Skrulls. The Skrulls are shapeshifters. They can take the form of any creature they come across, near enough perfectly, down to fine detail. And the Kree have used this to build an entire mythology around them. The Skrulls, the Kree say, are infiltrators, liars, parasites, a species you can never trust, because any one of them could be anyone. So the Kree frame the whole long war as a noble defense, protecting the galaxy from a creeping, shape-shifting menace, keeping everyone safe. And the truth, as is so often the case when an empire explains its own wars, is considerably less tidy. I'll come back to it, because the way it unspools is part of the texture of this whole region of the stack. Into all this arrives a soldier called Vers. She's part of an elite Kree unit. She can fire bolts of pure photon energy from her hands, energy she can barely control, and she has no memory of her life before about 6 years ago. She's been told she was rescued from a crash, given Kree blood and Kree training, and that the powers she has are a gift the Kree gave her. She's told to suppress her emotions, because emotion leads to instability, and instability leads to weakness, which is exactly the sort of thing an empire tells the powerful people it would rather keep on a leash. She has recurring dreams, a woman she doesn't recognize, a jet, a planet she can't place. Her mentor tells her they're just the static of a damaged mind. Nothing worth chasing. They are, of course, very much worth chasing. Because the truth is that Vers was Carol Danvers, an Air Force pilot from Earth, who got caught in an explosion involving an experimental engine, powered, as it happens, by the energy of one of the Infinity Stones from our foundation floor. The blast should have killed her. Instead, it rewrote her, gave her power that dwarfs anything the Kree produce naturally. And the Kree, unable to destroy her and barely able to contain her, settled for containing her mind instead. They wiped her memory and told her she was one of them. Her whole story is really about peeling that lie back, layer by layer, and what she finds underneath is that the Skrulls she's been hunting aren't monsters. They're refugees. Talos and his people, the ones she's been taught to fear, are a scattered, hunted population, just trying to find somewhere to exist without being exterminated. The Kree didn't fight a defensive war. They destroyed the Skrull homeworld and dressed the whole thing up in the language of protection. And once Carol understands that, she changes sides in a sense. She becomes the most powerful being in this corner of the cosmos, and she points that power at the Empire that made her instead of the people it told her to fear. I think that's why this region of the stack has stuck with me. It's not just space adventure, it's a story about how an empire manufactures an enemy, and what happens when one of its own best weapons figures out the trick. But now, since we're out here in the wider cosmos, let's talk about the rest of the neighbourhood, because it's busier than you'd think. There's Xandar, home of the Nova Corps, a sort of intergalactic police force, a whole shining civilization of billions of people just living their lives a long way from Earth. There are trading posts and prisons and outposts strung across the dark. There are warlords and salvagers and bounty hunters. It's a lived-in, populated, sprawling place. And one of the things I appreciate about how the story handles it is that Earth is genuinely a backwater here. A nothing little planet on the edge of things that the wider galaxy mostly hasn't heard of and certainly doesn't worry about, which is a humbling thought and an oddly relaxing one to drift off to. All that drama down on Earth, all those world-ending stakes, and from out here it's a quiet blue dot most of the universe has never bothered to name. And moving through all this, in the background, for a very long time before he ever steps fully into view, there's the cosmic tyrant I keep promising to get to. He's a titan, one of the last survivors of a dead world, and his whole worldview is built on a single grim conviction that he holds with the calm certainty of a religion. He believes the universe has finite resources, that life grows without limit until it outstrips what exists, and that everything inevitably ends in misery and starvation unless someone is willing to make a hard choice. Nobody else will. He watched it happen to his own world, and his solution, the thing he spends the whole story working toward, is to wipe out half of all life everywhere, not out of cruelty in his own mind. Randomly, fairly, without malice, half of everything, to give the other half room to flourish. He thinks of himself as the only one with the will to do what must be done. He's the one who raised Gamora and Nebula, the sisters from the Misfit Band, taking children from worlds he'd conquered and shaping them into weapons. He's the gravity that a great deal of the deep space story quietly orbits, the patient collector reaching for the scattered stones from our foundation floor, because of course, his terrible plan needs all 6 of them to work. I won't walk through where it all leads tonight, because it gets heavy and you might be drifting, but I wanted him here, in the deep space room, because that's where he lives. Out in the dark, certain he's right, doing arithmetic with other people's lives. The thing that makes him linger isn't his power, it's how calm he is about all of it. He's not a raging conqueror. He's a man who genuinely believes he's being merciful, which is a far more unsettling thing to be. Out here, in this sprawl, is where you find a particular little band of misfits who washed up together, more or less by accident, and they're worth their own room. So let's drift over to them. Let me start this one with a place rather than a person, because it's one of my favourite settings in the whole stack, and it is gloriously, ridiculously grim in a way I can't help enjoying. There's a mining colony out in deep space called Nowhere. People live there, work there, drink there, and the entire colony is built inside the severed head of a dead celestial. Just sit with that for a second. Remember those moon-sized cosmic beings from the foundation floor, the gardeners? One of them died at some point, somewhere out in the dark, and rather than let an enormous floating skull go to waste, people moved in. They started mining the bone and the leftover tissue, set up shops, built a society inside the cranium of a god. It's the kind of casual cosmic detail this part of the story does so well. The galaxy is so old and so strange that a dead deity the size of a moon is just real estate now. I find that endlessly charming. Somewhere in there, a being called the Collector keeps a vast hoard of rare and dangerous things, including, at one point, one of the Infinity Stones, because of course the universe's most dangerous objects end up in a curio cabinet inside a skull. Where else would they go? This is the corner of space where the Guardians come together, and they are not, by any stretch, a noble band of heroes who set out to do good. They're a collection of people who found each other because they were all in the same bad situation at the same time, and cooperating was the only way out. Collectively, they're a thief, an assassin, a walking engine of revenge, a sentient tree, and a genetically modified raccoon who is furious about existing. And somehow, this lot end up saving the galaxy. More than once. There's Peter Quill, who calls himself Star-Lord and is mildly wounded that nobody else does. He was taken from Earth as a child, the night his mother died, and grew up out here among salvagers and rogues, becoming a charming, not quite as clever as he thinks outlaw with an outstanding taste in old pop music and a habit of surviving on good instincts rather than good planning. There's Gamora, an assassin raised by a cosmic tyrant we'll get to in a moment, trying to claw her way free of him, carrying the particular damage of having been raised by someone who taught her that affection and violence were the same thing. And alongside her, in a thread that runs quietly underneath the louder stuff, there's her sister, Nebula, who was raised by the same tyrant in the cruelest way imaginable. Every time the two sisters were made to fight, and the father made them fight constantly, whichever one lost had a piece of her body replaced with machinery to make her stronger for next time. So Nebula became, over the years, more and more metal and less herself, losing again and again, rebuilt again and again, into someone full of rage that had nowhere useful to point. The slow thaw between those two sisters, from trying to kill each other to actually becoming family, is one of the more patient bits of character work tucked into this corner of space, and it pays off in ways that reach much further than you'd expect. There's Drax, who experiences language with total literalness, takes every single thing anyone says at face value, and is, for my money, one of the funniest characters in the whole story precisely because the humour never comes at his expense. It comes from dropping a man who cannot process metaphor into a universe that runs on it. And then there's Rocket and Groot, who I'd protect with my life. Rocket is the genetically modified creature who looks like a raccoon and would be extremely upset to hear you call him one. Underneath the weapons and the wisecracks and the constant low-level fury, he carries a very specific, very deep pain about how he came to exist, about being something that was made rather than born, taken apart and put back together by people who saw him as an experiment. It surfaces in unguarded moments, and it's genuinely affecting. Groot is a tree, a large, gentle tree-like being who can only say 3 words, "I am Groot," in different arrangements, and Rocket understands every shade of meaning in them. The two of them are inseparable. They always have been. There's a whole emotional universe in their friendship that the story keeps coming back to. The thread that ties this band most tightly to the rest of the stack runs through Peter's father, and it's the planet that is a person I promised you right at the start. Peter's father turns out to be a celestial called Ego, and Ego is a living planet. The whole world is him. The ground, the caverns, the glowing structures, all of it is the body of a single cosmic being who grew himself a planet to live as. And he spent eons seeding other worlds across the universe with his own biological material, looking for a child who inherited his power, because his plan, his grand ambition, is to use that child to expand himself across the entire cosmos, overwriting every other world with himself, turning all of existence into Ego. He explains it, by the way, as the most natural thing in the world, as simply what a being like him is for, which connects right back down to the Celestials and their indifferent cosmic processes. Ego is what happens when one of those vast ancient beings develops a personality and an ego to match the name, and decides the rest of the universe would look better as more of him. Peter's family, this ragtag, stolen-together band of misfits, choose each other over that. They fight Ego, a literal world, and win. And the man who raised Peter, a rough old ravager called Yondu, who abducted him in the first place, and was never once soft about it, sacrifices himself to save him, with a line about how he might have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy. I won't pretend that one doesn't get me a bit, even now. The whole arc of this corner of the galaxy is really about the difference between the family you're made by and the family you choose, played out at the scale of living planets and dead gods. Quite a lot of feeling, packed into a skull-shaped colony and a stolen ship. Right, we've been very big for a while now. Celestials, empires, living planets. Let's go in the complete opposite direction. Let's go small. Smaller than small. Let's go underneath the floor of reality itself. Everything we've talked about so far has been about going outward, up to the realms, out to space, out to the edges of an enormous cosmos. This room goes the other way. It goes down and in, past the small, past the very small, past the subatomic, until you reach a place where the ordinary rules of physics just sort of stop applying. That's the quantum realm, and it might be the strangest single location in the whole stack, which is a competitive category. The way in is through shrinking. There's a particle discovered decades ago by a scientist called Hank Pym that lets you reduce the distance between atoms, so you can shrink a person down without losing their strength or mass. Which is already a delightful idea, and the story gets a lot of gentle comedy out of it. A full-sized tank shrunk down to a keychain. A toy train suddenly enormous because the person looking at it has gone tiny. But if you keep going, if you shrink past the point where you're meant to stop, you don't just get smaller and smaller forever. You slip through into the quantum realm, a whole dimension that exists below the level where size means anything at all. And here's the part that hooks me. Down there, time doesn't behave. It comes loose. It stops moving the way it does up here, which means you can go in for what feels like a few minutes and come out to find that years have passed in the world above. Or in theory, you could be pulled somewhere else in time entirely, into your own past, into someone else's future. There are regions within it, time vortexes, where the whole thing gets even more unpredictable. The first person to really understand the cost of that was Hank Pym's wife, Janet. She was the original Wasp, and decades ago, to stop a missile, she shrank down past the safe point on purpose, knowing she might not come back. She slipped into the quantum realm and was simply gone. For 30 years. Her husband believed she was dead, mourned her, raised their daughter without her, all while she was down there, lost in a place where 30 years up here might have felt like something else entirely, but she wasn't gone. That's the quiet miracle of her thread. She survived down there, in a place no person was supposed to be able to survive, and eventually they find a way to reach in and pull her back out. And the reunion, when it comes, is handled in that understated way the best emotional beats in this story tend to be. An older, tired couple, astonished to be in the same room at the same time after 30 years apart. No big swelling speeches, just two people who'd given up on this, getting it anyway. And here's the fun detail, the one I love dropping in casually because of how enormous its consequences turn out to be. There's a man called Scott Lang, a thief turned reluctant hero who inherits the shrinking suit. And at one point he goes into the quantum realm to gather something on what's meant to be a quick trip, with Janet's people minding the controls up top. And while he's down there, something happens up in the world above. Something we'll circle back to. That means nobody is left at the controls. The way out closes, and Scott is stuck in the quantum realm, alone, with no way to know how much time is passing outside. He's down there about 5 years as it happens, in the world's time. To him, it's a few hours. And then by pure chance, a rat wanders across the control panel and switches the thing back on. And Scott walks out into a world that has moved on without him by half a decade. Which sounds like a throwaway bit of comedy, a rat saving the day, and it sort of is. But that accidental return, that loose relationship between time inside the realm and time outside it, ends up being the exact mechanism that lets the heroes undo the worst thing that ever happens to them. The whole recovery hinges on the fact that down there, in the place below the floor of reality, time doesn't keep proper hours. I think that's a wonderful thing for the fate of half the universe to rest on. A man, a rat, and a dimension that doesn't believe in clocks. It makes me feel oddly peaceful, actually, the quantum realm. The idea that underneath everything solid there's a place where time goes soft and a few minutes can hold years. And it's not empty down there either, which is a detail the story takes its time revealing. The deeper you go, the more you find that the quantum realm has its own ecosystems, its own inhabitants, whole strange civilizations living at a scale beneath the scale beneath the scale. Cities, politics, resistance movements, creatures and people who've been down there so long, they don't think of it as small or strange at all, because to them it's simply the world, the only one they've ever known. Which does a funny thing to your sense of perspective, if you let it. We think of it as the basement of reality, the place underneath everything important. To the people who live there, it's everything important, and our enormous world up here is the unimaginable abstraction. Janet, in all that lost time down there, didn't just float in a void. She lived. She learned the place, made her way through it, survived among its peoples, became someone who understood a world her husband back home couldn't even picture. When she finally comes back, part of what makes the reunion so quietly heavy is that she's returning from somewhere she can never fully explain to anyone. She spent half a lifetime in a place that has no words up here. There's a melancholy thread that runs through this whole region, really, underneath the comedy of shrinking tanks and giant toy trains. It's a story about people getting lost in time, and the people who keep the light on for them. A husband who never stopped believing his wife might still be down there. A daughter who grew up with a mother-shaped absence, and later, the thief who gets lost the same way, climbing out into a world that grieved him and moved on. The quantum realm is where the story keeps its quiet questions about time and loss, dressed up in a coat of fun, science fiction silliness, so they go down easy. I think that's a clever bit of design. You come for the shrinking suit and the comedy, and you leave having sat with the idea of being lost for years in a place where time doesn't keep proper hours and someone above's still waiting. We'll leave Scott climbing out of his van, blinking at a world that aged without him, and move along, because while reality has a strange basement, it also has doors in its walls. Doors most of the heroes never even knew were there. Here's something I find genuinely lovely about the way this story is built. For years, while Iron Man was flying around and Captain America was fighting in the streets, and all the famous heroes were doing their famous hero things, there was an entire hidden order of sorcerers quietly protecting the Earth from threats coming out of other dimensions, and not one of those heroes had the faintest idea they existed. Tony Stark never met a wizard. Steve Rogers, as far as we know, never once considered that alternate dimensions might be pressing up against the back of reality, and yet there they were. Magic was real the whole time, and it kept entirely to itself. The people doing this are the masters of the mystic arts, and the first thing one of them will tell you, slightly snippily, is that it isn't really mysticism at all. It's more like a science we don't have the framework for yet. The manipulation of energy, of space, of the barriers between overlapping realities. They draw on power from other dimensions to do what looks like magic, but they think of it as something closer to applied physics, with a very steep learning curve. Their main home base is a place called Kamataj, tucked away in Kathmandu, where they train, and they maintain a handful of sanctums around the world, in New York, London, and Hong Kong, which act as anchor points. Think of them as load-bearing walls. As long as the sanctums stand, the barriers between Earth and the darker dimensions that want in stay sealed. Knock them down, and the doors start to open. The way in for us, the character who learns all this from scratch, is Stephen Strange. And I'll say this plainly, at the start of his story, he is the single most unpleasant person in this entire universe. Not evil, just genuinely insufferable. A brilliant surgeon who knows he's brilliant and makes sure everyone around him knows it too. Who picks his cases based on which ones will make his record look good. Who treats anyone he deems less clever than himself as barely worth speaking to. A car crash wrecks his hands, ruins his ability to operate, and he burns through everything chasing a cure until, out of options, he hears about Kamataj and goes looking for a miracle. What he finds instead is a teacher called the Ancient One, who, when he gets sniffy and demands to know how any of this is possible, responds by knocking his spirit clean out of his body and sending it tumbling through 17 dimensions in about 4 seconds. It's a wonderful introduction to the scale of what's actually out there, both for him and for us. Up to this point, the story's biggest ideas had been about space and stones and realms. And here's a quiet woman in a temple casually demonstrating that reality is layered far deeper and far stranger than any of the spacefaring stuff had let on. A couple of these layers deserve a mention on their own. There's the mirror dimension, a sort of parallel reflection of the real world that sorcerers can step into, where they can fight and bend the architecture of a city around like folding paper without anyone in the real world getting hurt. It's where a lot of the training and a lot of the safer battles happen. And then there's the genuinely frightening one, the dark dimension, ruled by a being called Dormammu, an entity of pure devouring darkness who consumes entire realities and adds them to himself, and whose dimension exists outside of time. To be inside the dark dimension is, in a sense, to exist forever, because time doesn't pass there, which sounds like immortality, and that's exactly how it gets sold to the people Dormammu tempts. Eternal life. What they tend to leave out is everything else that comes with being absorbed into an endless hungry dark. The way Strange eventually deals with Dormammu is, for my money, the cleverest single thing in his corner of the story. And I'll tell it gently because it's more satisfying than tense. Strange has the Time Stone, one of our Foundation 6, set in an amulet. And rather than try to fight a being who consumes universes, which is plainly hopeless, he traps the two of them in a time loop. He goes to the dark dimension and confronts Dormammu, and Dormammu kills him. And then time resets, and Strange is back. And he confronts Dormammu again, and Dormammu kills him again, and again, and again, endlessly. Dormammu, a being so far outside of time that he has never once in his entire existence experienced a consequence repeating, is suddenly trapped in the one thing he has no concept of. The same moment, over and over, with no way out, forever. And eventually, he simply cannot bear it. And he agrees to leave Earth alone, just to make the loop stop. Strange beats a god of infinite darkness by being more annoying than eternity. I think that's marvellous. There's one more layer worth naming before we move on, a gentler one. The astral plane. It's the realm of consciousness, separated from the body, where your spirit can move while your physical self stays behind. Sorcerers use it to study, to heal, sometimes to fight spirit to spirit. It's a quieter, more contemplative dimension than most of the ones we've toured tonight, and I always picture it as a kind of dim, glowing in-between space, the place you go when you step halfway out of yourself. There's a lovely idea attached to it, that a sorcerer might leave their body sleeping and send their spirit off to read through the night, turning the pages of a book with nothing but a projection of themselves, getting an extra study while the body rests. As someone making a video for people lying in bed, I find that an appealing thought. Your body asleep, some quieter part of you still gently turning things over. And the tools the sorcerers use are charming in their practicality too. They get around between any 2 points in the world using sling rings, little circular devices worn on the fingers that let them open a spinning ring of golden sparks anywhere and step through it to anywhere else. No rainbow bridge required, no spaceship, just a flick of the hand and a doorway hanging in the air. It's the most casual possible way to treat the bending of space, and there's something delightful about powerful sorcerers using a reality warping ability, essentially the way the rest of us use a back door. One of them even has a relationship with a piece of clothing, a sentient cloak that picks its own wearer, has opinions and behaves rather like a loyal and slightly headstrong pet. The mystic arts are full of these small human touches tucked inside the cosmic stuff, and I think that's why the whole floor of the house works as well as it does. It's enormous and strange and dimension spanning, and also there's a man having a quiet disagreement with his coat. The whole point of this floor of the house, the thing I want you to drift away with, is that reality had doors in its walls the entire time. Behind the ordinary world, behind the famous heroes and their famous problems, there were always these other dimensions pressing in, and a small group of people quietly holding the doors shut so the rest of us could get on with our Tuesdays, none the wiser. Speaking of worlds hidden in plain sight, there's a whole nation that managed the same trick, right out in the open for centuries. Imagine a country that decided a very long time ago that the safest thing it could possibly do was pretend to be poor. Not just keep a few secrets, build an entire false face for the whole world to see and hide one of the most advanced civilizations that has ever existed behind it. That's Wakandu. And it's such a good idea and such a sad one when you think about why they had to do it, that the whole nation has stuck with me as one of the richest rooms in this house. Wakandu sits in East Central Africa, and the thing that makes it what it is fell out of the sky thousands of years ago, a meteorite made almost entirely of a metal called vibranium. And vibranium is extraordinary stuff, stronger than steel, able to absorb and store and release enormous amounts of energy, the single most remarkable natural material on Earth. The Wakandans wove it into absolutely everything they built. Their medicine, their architecture, their weapons, their aircraft, all of it generations ahead of anywhere else on the planet, all of it powered and shaped by this one impossible metal. And here's the bit that gets me. They looked at the rest of the world, at the long, brutal history of what powerful nations do to less powerful ones, at colonization, at how a place with something valuable tends to get torn apart by everyone who wants it, and they made a collective decision. The world will take what we have if it knows we have it, so we will make sure it never knows. They built a holographic shield over the whole country, projected the image of a poor, struggling, unremarkable developing nation, and behind that screen they had gleaming cities and warriors in armor and hovering ships that looked like they were designed 2 centuries from now. The official story was deliberate camouflage, invisibility as a survival strategy. The throne passes to a young king called T'Challa, who's thoughtful and measured and quietly less certain of himself than he appears, and he's got a family around him that I genuinely love. His sister, Shuri, a brilliant engineer who builds most of the wonderful technology and is, frankly, the smartest person in the country and possibly several countries, with the cheerful irreverence of a younger sibling who happens to be a genius. His mother, Ramonda, all grace and steel. Okoye, the fierce and principled general of the all-female royal guard. The Doru Muhlajai, warriors in red who'd walk into anything for the throne. It's a warm, capable, deeply rooted court, and it makes Wakandou feel less like a setting and more like a home. And the country itself isn't one smooth thing, which I appreciate. It's made up of several tribes, each with its own customs and look and way of doing things, who came together long ago around the vibranium and the throne. Off in the mountains there's one tribe, the Jabari, who held themselves apart from the rest, who don't use vibranium, who were left out of the gleaming high-tech version of Wakanda and rather resent it. Their leader is a big, blunt, funny, deeply principled man, and the relationship between his mountain people and the lowland throne is one of those nicely textured details that makes the place feel like a real nation with real internal history rather than a single tidy idea. When the king's in his lowest moment, it's the mountain tribe, the ones who'd been kept at arm's length, who end up showing him mercy. There's something quietly decent in that. The technology, too, is a joy in how thoroughly it's thought through. Because vibranium can absorb energy and release it, the Wakandans build it into everything in clever ways. Suits that soak up the force of every blow and then throw it back. Trains that run on magnetic rails. Healing technology generations ahead of anywhere else. Sand tables of light. Whole cities humming on a single impossible metal. It's a vision of what a place might have become if it had been left entirely alone to develop on its own terms. Never raided, never colonized, never interrupted. Which is, of course, exactly the point. Wakandou is a thought experiment with a holographic shield around it. This is who we might have been, it says, if no one had ever come to take. But the room I really want to take you into within Wakanda isn't the cities or the labs. It's the quietest, strangest part of the nation, and it's a kind of dimension all its own. The ancestral plane is a dimension connected to Wakanda. When a new king takes the throne, they're given a herb and ritually buried in sand, and their consciousness travels to this other place, a vast still landscape, often shown at a kind of eternal violet dusk, where the dead kings of Wakandou wait, appearing as great black panthers and then as the people they were. The new king meets their ancestors there, speaks with their late father, seeks counsel from those who held the throne before. It's Wakandou's own metaphysical realm, a place where the living and the dead sit down together, and it's rendered so beautifully and so calmly that I could happily linger there for an hour. There's no danger in it. It's just continuity, the reassurance that you are part of a long line and you're not carrying the weight entirely alone. Now, the conflict that comes to Wakandou is one the story handles with real care, and I want to give it its due gently, rather than treat it as some dramatic showdown. A man arrives to challenge for the throne, and he has every right to, by blood. His name is Killmonger, and he's the king's cousin, the son of a Wakandan prince who'd been living in America, who watched what the world did to people who looked like him outside of Wakanda's protection, and who came to believe that Wakanda's isolation wasn't wisdom at all. that it was a kind of moral cowardice, that hiding away with all this power while injustice ran unchecked everywhere else was a quiet form of abandonment. And the thing is, the story doesn't pretend he's simply wrong. His method, conquest, arming uprisings around the world, burning the old Wakanda down, that's where it goes off the rails. But the grievance underneath it, the argument that power kept only for the protection of your own people while you watch everyone else suffer, is still a failure. That's a real argument. T'Challa actually takes it on board. By the end, Wakanda doesn't go back to hiding. It opens up. It reveals its true nature to the world and starts reaching outward, building outreach centers, sharing what it has, trying to be the thing Killmonger accused it of failing to be, just without the burning. It's a rare example of a hero essentially conceding that the villain had a point and changing because of it. I find that quietly grown up, in a way a lot of stories aren't. So that's Wakanda. A whole advanced world hidden behind a fake poor one, with a realm of ancestors tucked away inside it, choosing at the end to stop hiding. There's another hidden place not unlike it, though it hides with magic rather than holograms, and it's guarded by something far older and stranger. Let's wander over there. There's a village you can only reach by going through a forest that doesn't want to be navigated. The trees move, the paths rearrange themselves. It shifts and folds like a maze that's actively trying to lose you, and only opens a way through at very specific moments. Get through it though, and you arrive somewhere that feels less like a hidden corner of Earth, and more like a doorway onto an older, mythic world. That's Tarlo. Tarlo is a mystical village, tucked away beyond that shifting forest, and it sits right up against the border of another realm entirely. The people there live alongside creatures out of legend, beings I'd half assumed were just decorative, until the story takes them completely seriously. There are guardian animals, mythological things, a great protective dragon. It's the kind of place where the line between remote village and fairy realm has worn so thin it barely exists anymore. And the creatures are wonderful, genuinely, because the story plays them completely straight. There are foxes with too many tails, and small fluffy creatures that look harmless and turn out to be fierce, and faceless beings, and at the centre of it, a vast, benevolent dragon, a great water serpent guardian who's protected the village across the ages. None of it is treated as a joke or a bit of set dressing. It's all simply real, part of the texture of a place that sits at the seam between our world and an older mythic one. I find that approach really satisfying. A lot of stories would wink at the audience about how silly a battle fox is. This one just lets Tarlo be exactly as strange and lovely as it wants to be, and trusts you to come along. The whole village has the feel of a watercolour painting that someone decided to live inside, all mist and green hills and slow rivers, which makes it one of the more restful places to picture as you're drifting off. And the people of Tarlo have a job, the same sort of job we keep finding tucked into the hidden corners of this universe. They guard a gate, because beyond that gate is something that very much wants out. The thing behind the gate is called the Dweller in Darkness, and it's an ancient, soul-consuming entity, the kind of old hungry dark we touched on in the dimension next door earlier. Though this one has its own particular trick. It learns voices, it listens, and it mimics, and it uses stolen voices to whisper through the gate and convince someone on the other side to open it. Which is a genuinely creepy idea, handled with a surprisingly light touch. The way this connects to the wider stack runs through one of the most powerful human beings who has ever lived, a man called Xu Wenwu, and the source of his power is an artifact, or really a set of them, that gives this whole region its name, the 10 Rings, 10 circular bands that fit around the forearms and can be wielded as weapons of devastating force, channeling energy across great distances. And here's the detail that places them among the truly ancient objects in this universe. Wenwu had them for around 1,000 years. They kept him alive, more or less unchanged, for 10 centuries. With them he built an empire, a real one, an organization called the Ten Rings that shaped history from the shadows, toppled governments, made and ended wars, all while staying largely invisible to the ordinary world. He gave it all up for a while, for a woman from Tarlo called Ying Li, who left her mystical village to be with him. They had 2 children, and then she was killed, and the grief of it pulled him straight back to the rings and the empire and the violence he'd set aside. And grief is really the engine of his whole story, because the reason he eventually marches on Tarlo, convinced he can hear his dead wife's voice calling to him from beyond that gate, is that the dweller in darkness has learned her voice and is using it as bait. He can't hear the deception. The grief won't let him. He's so desperate to believe she's trapped and waiting that he'd tear open a gate, holding back a soul-eating entity just for the chance. His children, Shang-Chi and his sister, Xieling, are the ones who have to stop it, and they do, together, with the people of Tarlo and their legendary creatures fighting alongside them. Their father dies pushing back the dweller long enough to give them a chance, and in his last moments passes the 10 rings to his son. So Shang-Chi ends up carrying these 1,000-year-old artifacts, and they start responding to him, shifting and adjusting to a new wielder for the first time in a millennium. What he'll do with that kind of inherited power is left as an open question, which is the right place to leave it. I like this room because it's self-contained in a way a lot of the others aren't. It's a complete little world, a hidden village and a mythic gate and an ancient set of rings and a family tragedy, all sitting quietly off to one side of the bigger story. You could fall asleep in Tarlo and the rest of the universe would carry on perfectly well without you having to keep track of anything, which again is rather the point tonight. From a place guarded against a hungry darkness, let's go to a place that is, in a sense, made entirely of cost. A lonely world at the far edge of space, where one of our foundation stones demands the steepest price of all. This is a small room, and a somber one, and I'll keep us in it only briefly, because it's the kind of place you don't really want to linger in, so much as quietly acknowledge before moving on. There's a planet at the very edge of known space called Vormir, a desolate, grey, wind-scoured world, all cliffs and perpetual gloom, and there's almost nothing on it. No cities, no people, no life beyond its cursed guardian. Just a single mountain with a sort of shrine at the top and a keeper who waits there. Vormir exists for one reason. It's where the Soul Stone is hidden, the last of our 6 foundation stones to really come into focus, and the one with by far the cruelest catch attached to it. Because the Soul Stone cannot simply be picked up. It demands a price, and the price is fixed and terrible. To claim it, you have to sacrifice something you love. Not money, not effort, not a piece of yourself in some metaphorical sense. A soul for a soul. You have to bring someone you genuinely love to that cliff and lose them, and only then will the stone let itself be taken. It's a horrible piece of cosmic design, and the story uses it to land 2 of its most devastating moments, both of which I'll touch only lightly, because you might be drifting and they're heavy. The keeper of the stone, the figure who waits on that mountain to explain the price to whoever climbs up seeking it, is a strange and fitting one. It's a villain from very early in the whole saga, a man who'd grabbed at the power of one of the stones long ago and was swept away by it, and ended up exiled here on this empty world, cursed to guard a treasure he can never use, and to tell every visitor exactly what it will cost them. He can't claim the stone himself. He can only point the way and watch other people pay. There's something almost mythological about that fate, a punishment shaped like patience, stranded for years on a lonely planet, the eternal doorman of a prize he'll never hold. I think the reason Vormir works as well as it does is that it strips everything down. There's no army to fight, no clever plan, no escape route. It's just a cliff and a price and a choice that nobody could possibly want to make. After all the spectacle of the rest of the stack, all the rainbow bridges and living planets and time loops, there's this one quiet grey world where the universe simply asks you what you're willing to lose and means it. There's something almost ceremonial about the place that I keep turning over. Most of the dangerous objects in this story are guarded by force, by armies, by ancient locks and hidden vaults. The Soul Stone is guarded by ethics, in a sense, by a test of the heart that no amount of strength can pass. You could be the most powerful being in the universe, capable of tearing the mountain apart, and it wouldn't help you in the slightest, because the stone doesn't care how strong you are. It cares what you love, and whether you'd give it up. That's a strange and rather profound thing to build into a rock. The one stone you can't take by force is the one that asks the most of you. And the two people in the whole story who do end up climbing that mountain to claim it, separately, in different chapters, both have to face the fact that the thing standing between them and the power they came for isn't an enemy at all. It's the person they brought with them, the one they trust most. That's a far heavier obstacle than any monster, and the Keeper just watches, every time. That's the detail that lingers. He doesn't try to stop anyone. He doesn't fight. He's been there so long, explaining the same terrible bargain to every visitor who makes the long climb, that he's become almost gentle about it. A kind of grim, patient tour guide to the worst decision of your life. Stranded forever on an empty world, narrating other people's heartbreak, unable to leave, unable to claim the very thing he spent an eternity guarding. Of all the fates in this universe, his might be the one I'd least want. We'll step out of here gently. From the loneliest place in the stack, let's go somewhere with the exact opposite atmosphere. Somewhere bright and busy and fluorescent, and deeply, deeply bureaucratic. A place that exists, of all things, outside of time itself. Of all the places we visit tonight, this is the one I'd least expect to find at the centre of a universe-spanning story. And that's exactly why I love it. Picture endless corridors, beige and brown and orange, the colour palette of an office building that stopped updating its decor sometime around 1975. Fluorescent strip lighting humming overhead, people in stiff uniforms, shuffling between desks, filing paperwork, queuing for things, stamping forms. It looks like the world's dullest government department, and it exists outside of time, oversees the entire flow of history, and for a very long time held more power than any god or empire or stone in the whole stack. This is the Time Variance Authority, the TVA. The idea behind it goes like this. The TVA claims there's one correct path through history, one proper sequence of events that leads to the best possible outcome for everything. They call it the sacred timeline, and the TVA's job, as they understand it, is to protect that single timeline from anything that might knock it off course. Whenever someone makes a choice they weren't supposed to make, or an event happens that wasn't meant to happen, the timeline starts to branch, to split off in a new direction. And the TVA swoops in, arrests the person responsible, who they call a variant, and prunes the branch, erases it. Everything that wasn't supposed to happen simply deleted, so the one true timeline stays clean. It's an enormous, chilling, faintly absurd operation, and the absurdity is the point. There's a cartoon mascot, a little animated clock, who cheerfully explains all of this in orientation videos. Bureaucratic murder, presented with the tone of a road safety film. I find the whole aesthetic genuinely funny, in the dry way the place is clearly meant to be. The way into this room is through Loki, or rather, a version of him who slips sideways out of his own story, grabs one of the foundation stones in a moment of chaos and uses it to escape. That escape creates a branch, which lands him immediately in the custody of the TVA, who treat the god of mischief as a minor clerical problem to be processed. He meets an analyst called Mobius, a decent, jet ski-loving man who sees something useful in him, and the two of them go hunting a different, more dangerous Loki variant who's been causing trouble across time. And it's in that hunt that the place cracks open and shows you what it really is, which is where it gets genuinely affecting under all the comedy. The agents of the TVA, all of them, every loyal worker stamping forms and pruning timelines, are themselves variants, ordinary people plucked out of their own branching lives, stripped of their memories, given new names and uniforms, and set to work erasing exactly the kind of deviation they each used to be. Mobius, who believes in the mission completely, had a whole life once, a real one. The institution he serves with total conviction took it from him, and he doesn't even know. The whole organization is built on a lie so complete it consumed the people enforcing it. And behind it all, behind the cartoon clock and the corridors and the pruning, there's a single person, a variant of a man, sitting alone at the end of time in a citadel, who calls himself He Who Remains. The short version of his story is one of the bigger ideas in the whole stack, so I'll lay it out plainly. A long time ago, across countless universes, there were many versions of this same man, and some of those versions went to war with each other, universe against universe, a multiversal war so catastrophic it threatened to unmake everything. He Who Remains is the version who found a way to end it. He weaponized a creature that helped him end the multiversal war, then used the TVA to prune every branch that might produce another dangerous version of himself, effectively collapsing the whole sprawling multiverse down into one safe, controllable, sacred timeline. The TVA, the pruning, the sacred timeline, all of it was his system for keeping the other versions of himself from ever being born again. He presents it as a grim mercy. The one timeline, he argues, is the only thing standing between everyone and another multiversal war. And the unsettling thing is, he might even be telling the truth. He offers Loki and Sylvie, the other Loki variant, a choice. Take over the system and keep the timeline safe, or kill him and let the multiverse split wide open with all the danger that brings. Sylvie, who was taken by the TVA as a child and has spent her whole life running from it, who has every reason in the world to want it torn down, makes her choice. She kills him, and the single timeline shatters into countless branches, all at once. Everything that was ever pruned, every possibility that was ever erased, suddenly allowed to exist again. There's a place these pruned things go, by the way, when the TVA deletes them. It's called the Void, a desolate wasteland at the very end of time, where all the erased people and destroyed timelines get dumped together. It's a junkyard of discarded realities prowled by a giant cloud creature that consumes anything new that arrives. A whole landscape of things the universe decided it didn't want. We'll find that the Void turns up again later when some other wanderers get dropped into it. But for now, just hold the image, the end of time used as a landfill. And Loki's own ending, after all this, is one of the strangest and quietly saddest in the whole stack. So I'll close this room with it. The shattered multiverse is dangerous. Too many branches, too much weight, all of it threatening to collapse and destroy everything. And Loki, who spent the entirety of his existence wanting a throne, wanting power, wanting to be seen, finds that the only way to hold it all together is to do it himself, by hand. So he goes to the end of time and takes the whole tangle of branching timelines into his own grip. And he holds them. He sits at the center of everything and becomes the thing that keeps every reality stable and alive, all of it flowing out from him like the branches of a great tree, alone, probably forever, completely unseen. It's such a peculiar fate for that character. He wanted recognition more than anything, and what he ended up with is a responsibility so total and so invisible that nobody will ever know he's the one bearing it. He holds up every universe, and not a soul can see him doing it. I find that oddly beautiful at 1 a.m, the most attention-hungry person in the whole story, quietly becoming the load-bearing wall of all reality, with no audience at all. That shattering Sylvie set off, though, has consequences everywhere. Before we go and look at them, let's stop in a much smaller, much more intimate kind of made-up world. One built by a single person out of nothing but grief. Most of the worlds we've toured tonight are old. Ancient stones, immortal gardeners, 3,000-year-old rings, bureaucracies outside of time. This one is different. This one is brand new and very small, and it was built by one person, very quickly, out of the worst pain she had ever felt. And I think it might be the most human place in the entire stack. The person is Juan Duch Maximoff, and to understand the little world she makes, you have to understand how much had been taken from her by the time she makes it. Her parents, killed when she was a child, her twin brother, killed in front of her, and then the person she had come to love, an android called Vision, killed twice in a single afternoon, the second time by having something torn out of his head, which is about as final as it gets. And after all of that, she came back from a 5-year absence, which we'll come to elsewhere, to find that the world had moved on, and he was still gone. That's a quantity of grief that I'm not sure any person is built to hold. So she goes, half by accident and half by something deeper, to a small ordinary town called Westview, New Jersey. And she does something extraordinary and terrible without fully meaning to. She rewrites it. She wraps the whole town in her power and reshapes reality inside it. And inside that bubble, she builds herself the one thing she wants more than anything: a normal, happy, uncomplicated life. And here's the detail that makes it so striking. The thing that makes the whole world she builds so specific. She builds it as a sitcom, old television, the kind of comfortable, gentle, black and white domestic comedy where every problem is small and gets tidily solved within the half hour, and everyone you love is safe and the laugh track tells you when to feel warm. She gives herself a version of Vision alive again. She gives herself a home, a marriage, eventually 2 children. She reaches with all that overwhelming power, not for revenge or a throne or anything grand at all, but for the most ordinary domestic contentment imaginable. The genre that promises everything works out by the end of the episode. It would be easy to make her a villain for this because she has, in the most literal sense, trapped an entire town of real people inside her fantasy, and they can feel it, trapped in roles they didn't choose. The story doesn't shy away from that, but it understands what's underneath it, and it gives the understanding to Vision, the gentle one, in a single line that genuinely stopped me the first time I heard it. He's trying to make sense of grief, of what it even is, and he says that grief is just love with nowhere to go, love with no place to go. That's the whole town, really. That's the entire world she built, summed up in 6 words, a bubble of misdirected love that had lost the person it was meant for and had to put itself somewhere. The way it ends is quiet and almost unbearably sad, and it's the right ending. Wanda comes to understand what she's doing to the real people caught inside, and she chooses to take the bubble down, knowing exactly what it will cost her. Because the version of Vision she made, and the 2 children she made, they're all part of the world she built. They're held together by her power, and when the bubble comes down, they come down with it. They simply stop existing. She has to dismantle her own happy ending with her own hands and lose her family a second time in order to set the town free. The made-up Vision, in their last moment together, tells her they have said goodbye before, so it stands to reason they'll say hello again, and neither of them quite knows what to say. I'm not sure I would either. What I find so affecting about this little world, and why I wanted to give it a quiet room of its own rather than fold it into the bigger multiverse stuff that follows, is the scale of it. We've spent the whole night with cosmic forces and ancient empires and the literal source code of reality. And here, tucked among all of that, is one of the most powerful beings on the planet using a power that could level cities, to build herself a sitcom, to get her family back for a little while. It's the smallest possible use of the biggest possible power, and it's so recognizably, painfully human that it lands harder than any of the cosmic stuff. Anyone who has lost someone understands, immediately and without explanation, exactly what she was trying to do. She doesn't get to keep it, but for a few episodes in a small town in New Jersey, she got to have it, and then she let it go. That sound she hears at the very end, the faint voices of her vanished children, somewhere out in the dark, is what sends her into the next part of her story, and the next part of ours. Because Sylvie's shattered multiverse and Wanda's bottomless grief are about to run straight into each other, and the result is the whole house we've been touring suddenly multiplying into countless versions of itself. Right, so this is the part where the whole conceit of tonight's video sort of pays itself off gently, without me having to make a big thing of it. Because everything we've toured so far, every realm and dimension and hidden corner, has been part of one universe, one reality, with a lot of strange rooms in it. And the thing that happened at the end of time, when that single timeline got shattered, means there isn't just one anymore. There are countless versions, countless Earths, countless variations, all branching out alongside each other. The house we've been wandering through turns out to be one house in an infinite street of almost identical houses, each one a little bit different. The first person who really brings this home, quite literally punching holes in it, is a teenager called America Chavez. And her power is wonderful in its simplicity. She can open doorways between universes. She can punch a hole in the wall of one reality and step through into another. The catch is that she can't control it. It tends to fire off when she's frightened, and it drags whoever's nearby through with her. So she's spent her life tumbling from world to world, never quite landing, always running from whatever's chasing her this time. What's chasing her in this case is Wanda. The same Wanda from the little town made of grief, except now her grief has found a new and far more dangerous shape. She got hold of a book of dark magic, a genuinely corrupting thing, and it's been quietly rewriting her, steering her. And in her dreams she keeps slipping into other universes, inhabiting versions of herself, and in one of those universes she finds it. A world where her two children, the ones she had to let go when the bubble came down, are real, alive, with a mother who gets to keep them. And she decides she's going to take America's power, the power to travel between universes, and use it to go to that world and stay there, with her boys. Anyone standing between her and that, she's willing to walk straight over, which is what makes her so frightening here. Her goal is, on its face, the most understandable thing imaginable, a mother wanting her children, and that's precisely what makes it tragic, rather than simple. The chase takes us on a tour of the multiverse, which is the bit I find genuinely delightful, because it's the story opening doors onto its own alternate selves. At one point, Strange and America land in a universe that branched off differently from ours, and Earth, where the great heroes formed a secret ruling council called the Illuminati. And it's a fascinating little window, because the faces are familiar and wrong all at once. There's a version of Captain Carter, an Earth where it was Peggy Carter rather than Steve Rogers who took the super soldier serum and became that world's great hero. There's a version where Maria Rambeau became Captain Marvel instead of Carol Danvers. There's a brilliant scientist called Reed Richards leading them, a figure we'll properly meet elsewhere. It's a whole alternate Earth glimpsed in a single sequence, a reminder that every choice we watched get made in the main story got made differently somewhere else, with different people stepping into the famous roles. The technique Wanda uses to reach across realities, by the way, is called dreamwalking. It lets a sorcerer send their consciousness into another universe and take over the body of their variant there, the version of themselves that lives in that world. So she can sit safely in one reality while effectively possessing herself in another. Strange ends up having to use the same dark technique himself, projecting into the body of a dead version of himself in another universe, which is exactly as unsettling as it sounds, in order to reach her. The final confrontation happens at a mountain fortress, the seat of the Dark Book's power, and it isn't won by force, because by that point Wanda's power is simply beyond his. It's won by showing her the truth. The children she's trying to reach in that other universe are terrified of her. She's become, to the very kids she's chasing, the frightening thing. And that breaks through. She sees what her love has twisted into, and she chooses to end it. destroying the dark book and the fortress and, it seems, herself, to make sure no version of her can be corrupted by it again. Her fate's left deliberately uncertain, which the story has a habit of doing with its most powerful people. But now, the friendliest, warmest example of universes colliding, and a much-needed bit of lightness after all that. Because the multiverse opening up doesn't only let through dark sorcerers and cosmic threats, it also lets through other versions of the same beloved hero. And the example I mean is Spider-Man. There's a young Peter Parker in the main universe whose secret identity has just been blown wide open to the entire world. And in trying to magically fix it, a spell goes wrong and starts pulling people in from other universes. Specifically, people who knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man in their world. And what comes through is extraordinary. Villains from other realities, yes, pulled across the gap, close to the moment of their various defeats. But also, eventually, two other Peter Parkers. Two older versions of Spider-Man from two other universes, each carrying their own losses and their own scars and their own hard-won version of the same lesson everyone with that power seems to learn. That great power demands great responsibility. And the three of them, three Spider-Men from three separate universes, standing in the same place, understand each other instantly and completely. Same lessons, different bruises. There's a moment, and I'll keep it gentle because it's one of the loveliest small things in the whole stack, where one of the older Peters, a man who in his own universe once failed to catch someone he loved as she fell, gets to catch someone falling here in this universe, and for one moment, a very old wound in a completely different reality gets to heal. That's what the multiverse can do when it's not being terrifying. It can let a person fix, somewhere else, the thing they could never fix at home. It costs the young Peter dearly to set it all right, in a way that's worth sitting with for a moment, even gently, because it's one of the quietly braver endings in the whole stack. The only way to send all those people back to their own universes and stop the realities from tearing into each other turns out to be a clean version of the very spell that started the trouble. A spell that makes the entire world forget that Peter Parker exists. Not forget he's Spider-Man. Forget him. Everyone he loves, every friend, the people closest to him, all of them will simply no longer know who he is. He'll still remember them. They won't remember him at all. He chooses it anyway, because it's the only way to keep them safe and put the universes back where they belong, and he lets himself be erased from the memory of everyone who ever cared about him, and starts over completely alone. It's a heavy thing to do, choosing to become a stranger to the people you'd do anything for, precisely so they can be safe. There's no villain in that ending, just a kid quietly accepting a kind of loneliness to fix a thing he feels responsible for. But the image I want to leave this section on isn't the loneliness. It's those three figures swinging together, three versions of the same good person, from three different houses on that infinite street, all helping each other for one night, and all carrying the same quiet creed. The multiverse, at its warmest, is just the reassurance that somewhere out there, another version of you made it, or got the catch or learned the lesson a little sooner. There's something comforting in that, I think. We'll hold on to it rather than the lonely bit, since it's late and you deserve the warmer image to drift on. And as it happens, the street keeps getting longer. New houses keep drifting into view. Let's go and look at a couple of the newest arrivals. So the Street of Universes keeps growing, and a couple of the newest houses on it are worth a wander because they've got a completely different flavour to everything we've toured so far. They feel less like our world with strange rooms in it, and more like genuinely separate places that have only just come into view. The first is a universe with a wonderfully specific texture to it. Picture the future as people imagined it back in the 1960s. Gleaming retro futurism. Flying cars that look like they came off a vintage magazine cover. A bright, optimistic version of tomorrow. All chrome and clean lines and hope. That's the world the Fantastic Four call home, and it's a different Earth from the main one, with its own history, where they're already established as that world's beloved heroes, celebrated for years before we ever arrive. It's a lovely choice, giving them a whole separate reality with its own retro aesthetic, because it lets them feel like genuine new neighbours, rather than just more people crowded into the familiar world. The four of them got their abilities the same way a lot of things in this universe begin, through exposure to cosmic radiation, on a space mission, and each of them came back changed in a way they're still learning to live with. There's Reed Richards, the leader, almost certainly the most intelligent person in any room he walks into, and gifted, mercifully, with the decency not to make everyone feel small about it. He's warm, genuinely so, and everything he does comes back to his family. There's Sue Storm, who can turn invisible and throw up force fields, and who has a richer inner life than people tend to assume, partly by her own design. As the story nicely puts it, she's not invisible because she wants to vanish. She's invisible because she's learned to choose when to be seen. There's her brother Johnny, who bursts into flame and flies, all swagger and youth. And there's Ben Grimm, transformed into a great creature of orange stone, enormous and rocky, and surprisingly at peace with a thing that would break most people, in the manner of someone who made his hard bargain a long time ago and stopped fighting it. The threat that arrives in their world is about as big as threats get, and it scales right back up to the cosmic foundation we started the night on. A being called Galactus, an entity on the scale of those planet-sized celestials, except Galactus doesn't seed worlds. He consumes them. He travels the universe devouring entire planets to sustain himself, and he's set his enormous attention on their Earth. He's heralded by another striking figure, the Silver Surfer, a gleaming silver being who rides ahead of him across space to mark the worlds that are next. The scale of it is genuinely cosmic, a hunger the size of the universe, arriving at one small planet's door. The surfer is a sad figure when you understand the bargain underneath the shine. A herald like that doesn't serve a planet eater out of cruelty. The usual shape of these arrangements is a terrible trade, agreeing to lead the devourer to other worlds in exchange for sparing one's own, becoming the scout for an apocalypse to save a single home. So the gleaming silver figure, skating ahead through the stars, marking planets for consumption, is carrying a private grief the size of a world, doing an unforgivable job for an understandable reason. That's the kind of texture that makes even the most cosmic threats in this story land emotionally. There's almost always a person, or something that used to be one, underneath the spectacle, paying a price you can recognise. And what I find interesting about how the Fantastic Four meet it is that their first instinct isn't overwhelming force. It's to go and talk, to try to negotiate with a planet eater, to appeal to whatever sentience might be in there, to find a mechanism, a clever solution, a way through that doesn't just come down to hitting the problem until it stops. They're scientists and a family first and fighters second, and that gives their whole corner of the multiverse a different energy from a lot of the stack. Curiosity and care rather than spectacle. The domestic and the cosmic sitting right next to each other, a couple expecting their first child, while a god the size of a solar system comes to eat their planet. The other newish house on the street is a much darker one, and it connects straight back to a place we've already visited. Remember the void, that junkyard at the end of time, where the TVA dumped everything it pruned? It turns out other wanderers end up there too. A pair of very mismatched heroes, a relentlessly talkative, regenerating mercenary, and a gruff, weary, clawed loner get dropped into that wasteland and find it ruled by a powerful and frightening figure who's gathered the discarded heroes of dead timelines around her. It's a whole landscape built out of abandoned realities, characters whose universes decided they weren't needed, all washed up together in the cosmic landfill. And the two newcomers, through a lot of conflict and reluctant bonding, end up forging a genuine friendship out there in the wreckage. I won't go deep into it, partly because it's a good deal louder and ruder than anything else we've toured tonight and doesn't suit the hour, but the image fits the theme. Even the discarded universes, the pruned and forgotten ones, are still out there, still inhabited, still capable of producing a bit of unlikely friendship at the end of all things. The point of these newer houses, the thing I want you to drift off holding, is that the street isn't finished. The stack is still being built. New universes keep arriving, each with its own look and feel and its own people. And the story has quietly stopped being about one world a long time ago. It's about a growing neighbourhood of them, which makes the last room I want to visit a bit of a gentle surprise. Because after all, these exotic realms and alternate Earths and cosmic newcomers, I want to go back to the most familiar place of all and make the case that it was a universe worth marvelling at the whole time. Here's the gentle turn I've been wanting to make all night. We've toured golden realms and living planets and dimensions outside of time, and through all of it there's been this one place, sitting quietly in the background, that I've kept treating as the ordinary baseline. The normal world, the default, the plain Earth that all the strange stuff happens to. And I want to spend this last room making the case that it was never ordinary at all. That the most familiar house on the street is, when you actually look at it, every bit as strange as the exotic ones. Because think about what's actually been going on down there the whole time. This is a world where, for decades, a global spy organisation quietly ran things from the shadows. And that organisation, it turned out, had been hollowed out from the inside by a cult of fascists who'd embedded themselves so deeply that nobody could tell where the good institution ended and the rot began. That's not a normal world. That's a place where the people in charge of keeping everyone safe had been secretly compromised for 2 generations, and the discovery of it brought the whole apparatus crashing down. We tend to file that under spy thriller and move on, but step back and it's as unsettling as anything in the cosmic realms. This is also a world that quietly manufactured enhanced people. The super soldier program that produced the first great patriotic hero in the 1940s never really stopped haunting the place. There was a man given that same treatment in the 1950s, a black soldier who served and was then secretly imprisoned for 30 years by the very government that used him, erased from the records, told he didn't exist. There were experiments and serums and attempts to recreate that lightning in a bottle running underneath the surface of the ordinary world for the better part of a century, each one leaving damage behind. The familiar Earth has a basement full of things it did and tried to forget, which makes it not so different from Asgard hiding its conquests under a layer of gold. It's also a world where a quiet, careful scientist got caught in a burst of radiation and now carries an enormous green creature of pure force inside him that comes out when his heart rate climbs too high. And I bring that up not for the spectacle, but for the strangeness of the arrangement itself. When you really look at it, there's a man walking around on the ordinary Earth who is, in a meaningful sense, 2 people sharing one body. The careful, anxious scientist who spends years trying to cure himself, to keep the other one contained, and the enormous angry thing that he can always feel in there, waiting. The slow, uneasy peace he eventually makes with it, learning to stop fighting the other half of himself and instead live alongside it, is one of the quieter character arcs the familiar Earth produces. It's a story about making friends with the part of yourself you've spent your whole life afraid of, which is about as human a thing as this universe ever does, dressed up as a big green creature smashing through walls. And it's a world with neighbourhoods. That's the bit I find most quietly lovely. For all the world-ending cosmic stakes, the most beloved hero down here is a teenager from Queens who mostly just wants to help the people on his own few streets, who finds someone's stolen bike, who stops a robbery at the corner shop, whose whole sense of what the job is for stays rooted at the scale of a single neighbourhood, even after he's met gods and travelled between universes. There's a version of the great patriotic shield being carried now by a man who wins not through superior force, but through patience, through the specific, stubborn ability to find the actual human being underneath whatever crisis is roaring on the surface, and talk to them There are oddball teams forming out of broken, discarded people, a collection of anti-heroes, and former villains, and damaged soldiers who nobody really asked for, who end up saving the day precisely because they were all just there when it mattered, and who find that being a found family is its own kind of strength. That's the texture of the familiar Earth, when you stop treating it as the boring baseline and look at it properly. Hidden histories, buried experiments, a global conspiracy, street-level kindness, and a constant low hum of ordinary people deciding to be better than their circumstances. It has its own metaphysics, in a sense. Its central law isn't gravity or magic. It's that the small choice to show up for someone keeps turning out to matter more than all the cosmic power flying around overhead. And I think that's why, after touring the entire stack, this is the house I'd actually want to fall asleep in. Not the Golden Realm, not the living planet, not the dimension outside time, the ordinary one, the one with the neighbourhoods, because the whole sprawling structure we've walked through tonight, all the stones and celestials and timelines, only ever really mattered because of what it threatened, which was a perfectly ordinary world full of perfectly ordinary people getting on with their Tuesdays. Everything cosmic in this universe is ultimately in service of protecting something deeply uncosmic. A kid in Queens, a small town in New Jersey, a fishing village in Norway full of refugee gods learning to run a chip shop. The plain Earth was the point the whole time. It just took walking through every other universe to see it clearly. So let's pull back one last time and look at the whole thing at once before we let the night go quiet. So that's the house. Or the street of houses, really, which is what it turned into somewhere along the way. I find it does something nice to my head, laying it all out end to end like this. Right at the bottom, the foundation, 6 rocks that hold up the basic physics of everything, and enormous patient gardeners, the size of moons running a slow process that has nothing to do with us. Then the caretaker world, immortals tucked quietly into human history, present for everything, allowed to change almost nothing. Then the golden realms strung along their world tree, beautiful and built on buried secrets. The dim ancient corner where something older than light slept in its ships, waiting for a clock that ticks once an age. The whole sprawling cosmos out beyond, with its tired old war and its empires and its lived-in dark, where Earth is just an unremarkable blue dot most of the galaxy never bothered to name. And then all the stranger rooms. A mining town inside a dead god's skull. A place beneath the floor of reality where time goes soft and a few minutes can hold years. Doors in the walls of the world that a handful of quiet sorcerers spent centuries holding shut. A hidden nation that pretended to be poor to keep itself safe, with a realm of ancestors waiting inside it at eternal dusk. A mythic village guarded against a darkness that learns your loved ones' voices. A lonely grey planet that asks you what you're willing to lose and means it. A fluorescent bureaucracy outside of time, and the lonely man at the end of it, and the trickster who ended up holding every timeline in his hands, with nobody to see him do it. A small town in New Jersey built out of one person's grief, because grief, as we learned in there, is just love, with nowhere to go. And then the whole thing multiplying, the single timeline shattering into countless branches, an infinite street of almost identical houses, alternate Earths where different people stepped into the famous roles. 3 versions of the same good kid swinging through the air together, each one having learned the same lesson in a slightly different world. New neighbours still arriving, a retro-futurist Earth with a planet eater at its door. A junkyard at the end of time where even the discarded realities are still somehow inhabited. The stack still being built, even now. And underneath all of it, holding it up just as surely as those 6 rocks, the most ordinary world of the lot. The one with the neighbourhoods, the one that all the cosmic machinery was in the end only ever there to protect. What strikes me, now that it's all spread out, is how little of it is actually about power in the end, despite power being the thing everyone's always reaching for. The stones, the rings, the serum, the magic, all the enormous forces. The story keeps quietly arranging things so that the power matters less than what someone decides to do with it, or give up for it, or protect with it. The most powerful person in the whole stack ends up using it to build a sitcom so she can hold her family a little longer. The trickster who wanted a throne his whole life ends up choosing to become an invisible support beam for all of reality. The kid with the cosmic upgrade keeps choosing his own few streets. Over and over, the biggest powers in the universe get spent on the smallest, most human things. And the story always treats that as the right call. I rather agree with it. There's more coming, of course. There always is. The street keeps getting longer, new doors keep appearing in walls we thought were solid, and there are whole groups of heroes and whole corners of the multiverse still drifting toward us out of the dark. But that's for another night. Several other nights, probably. I've got more of these planned if you'd like to wander through some other corner of all this another time. For now, though, I think we've walked far enough. We've opened every door I wanted to open, and the house has gone quiet, and so should we. Thanks for keeping me company through all of it. Wherever you've drifted off to by now, somewhere back around the dead god's skull, or the town made of grief, I hope it's a soft place to land. Rest well. The universes will all still be here in the morning, every single one of them.